Welcome to today's Explainer. We are unpacking a genuinely fascinating strategic market analysis today, one that looks right into the heart of Italy's automotive future. Our main goal for this Explainer is to share some highly actionable, data-driven insights that are basically going to shatter a few preconceived notions you might have about the electric vehicle transition. We're going to be looking at the tension between cutting-edge physics and everyday economics, and honestly, we're hoping to provide a ton of value for anyone trying to understand where the automotive market is actually heading.
Okay, let's dive into this. 16 million. That is just a massive, massive number. And it represents a hidden structural challenge currently sitting right out there on Italian roads. When we look beyond just private cars and include light commercial vehicles, 16 million is the total addressable market of vehicles that are over 20 years old. It's a staggering ecological hurdle for sure, but as you'll see, it's also the primary frontier for the circular economy.
So here is our roadmap for today. First up, we've got the aging fleet challenge. Then we'll look at why the physics actually favor EVs, followed by the real economic barriers holding buyers back. And finally, we'll wrap up with the systemic solutions and insights needed to fix it all.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the aging fleet challenge, which is essentially a massive structural inertia on our roads today.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the issue. The reality on the ground is just staggering. 1 in 4 passenger cars in Italy, that's roughly 10 million out of a total 40.2 million national baseline vehicles, are over 2 decades old. Just think about that for a second. 25% of the private passenger fleet has literally been on the road since the early 2000s or even earlier.
Now, it's super tempting to romanticize old Italian cars, right? But the data tells a completely different story. If we look at the vehicles in that 20 to 29-year-old bracket, only about 388,000 are officially protected by the ACI safeguard list as historic heritage models. The rest, over 9.6 million cars, are simply what the data calls aging utility or vetusto vehicles. These are not pristine collector's items sitting in climate-controlled garages, no way. They are the dented, noisy, everyday beaters held together by hope and duct tape. Millions of people are driving these aging utility vehicles out of pure economic necessity just to commute and survive.
Moving right along to Section 2, why physics actually favor EVs and shattering some of those preconceived notions.
So, let's pose the big question here. Can an EV really last 20 years? We are all super familiar with the fragility of a 20-year-old gas guzzler, right? The constant trips to the mechanic, the oil leaks, the failing transmissions. And because of our everyday experience with things like smartphones, a lot of people just naturally assume EV batteries are going to die in a few years. But when we pivot away from consumer electronics and look at the technical reality of electric drivetrains, well, the physics tell a completely different story. The fundamental physics actually make the internal combustion engine a liability for long-term ownership, whereas EVs are built for incredible longevity. This is based on 3 main pillars. First, there is essentially zero mechanical wear. EVs have no pistons, no timing belts to snap, no clutches, and no head gaskets to blow. That completely removes the exact things that send you to the mechanic in tears. You remove the thermal stress and friction that eventually kill combustion engines. Second, we have what is called the state of health, or SOH, functional surplus. And third, an absolute game changer, LFP, or lithium iron phosphate chemistry. This specific battery chemistry is capable of 3,000 to 4,000 complete charge cycles. We are talking about a theoretical potential of 500,000 kilometers. The battery can literally outlast the vehicle's chassis.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the field data from Geotab on tens of thousands of vehicles. We see something incredible. The average annual battery degradation is only about 1.5 to 1.8%. So after a full 20 years of ownership, that battery still retains a 65 to 70% state of health. While the market might view that as a spent asset, it is actually a massive functional surplus. If you are a pragmatic driver just doing a 20 to 30 kilometer daily commute for work or groceries, that degraded battery still provides roughly triple the range you actually need.
Which leads us into a fascinating contradiction. Section 3. The real economic barriers and the paradox of the market. Here is the paradox. If the physics say yes, if these cars can absolutely last 20 years with minimal mechanical wear, why aren't the people driving those 16 million aging vehicles buying them? Well, we have to look at this with real empathetic realism. The owners of these aging utility cars operate on total amortization. They want absolute minimal operating costs, and they have very real, very valid financial fears. So, the crucial point is the initial capital barrier.
Frugal buyers who just want to get from point A to point B economically are usually looking for used assets well under a €10,000 threshold. Currently, the electric vehicle market simply doesn't have a stabilized third-hand market to meet them at that price point. These buyers are frankly terrified of the steep initial devaluation of newer EVs, so they just stick to the stabilized prices of old internal combustion engines.
But it's not just the purchase price, is it? It's the fear of what happens after. We call this the catastrophic failure paradigm. Put yourself in their shoes for a second. If an alternator or head gasket blows on a 15-year-old Fiat Punto, you can take it to a local mechanic and fix it for a few €100. Easy. But if an out-of-warranty EV has a failure in the high-voltage battery or inverter, the original manufacturer replacement cost could easily exceed the total residual value of the car. Because there isn't a widespread, low-cost, independent mechatronics network to repair EV modules yet, a cheap used EV is perceived as a massive financial liability.
And then we have the infrastructure inequality, or what we call the garage constraint. A large portion of the people driving 20-year-old cars live in suburbs or city centers, and they have to park on the street. If you have a private garage, you can charge your EV at highly profitable domestic electricity rates. The savings equation works perfectly. But if you are forced to rely on expensive public fast-charging networks just because you park on the street, that savings equation completely breaks down. Running the EV suddenly becomes way more expensive than running the old gas utility car it was meant to replace.
So how in the world do we fix this broken equation? Let's dive into Section 4, Systemic Solutions and Insights. To unlock this massive market, the sources outline a super clear three-step systemic roadmap. Number 1, State of Health certification. We absolutely need standardized, transparent certificates for used batteries to create financial collateral and stabilize used EV prices. Number 2, a modular, independent aftermarket. We must shift away from replacing entire battery packs and move toward doing cell-level repairs through independent mechanics. And number 3, regulatory expiration dates. Urban bans on older Euro 4 and Euro 5 emissions vehicles are essentially acting as involuntary market drivers, officially putting an expiration date on the old combustion utility model. Let's move on and see how this builds to a fantastic insight from the source material. The transition of the Vetusto segment cannot be product-led. It must be system-led. You can't just build a cheaper car. You have to build a whole circular support structure around it. The ecosystem has to exactly mirror the independent, low-cost ICE repair network we all rely on today.
To make that happen, here are the specific strategic actions required from key stakeholders right now. Manufacturers need to step up and shift toward modular, open repair battery architectures to lower the perceived risk of asset obsolescence. Moving over to policymakers, they must implement charging parity, meaning subsidies or regulated rates for public charging in residential areas so people without garages aren't financially penalized. And finally, the industry as a whole needs to establish that national state of health certification standard we talked about to finally unlock the under €10,000 used market. If we do this, EVs stop being premium novelties and actually become durable, reliable utilities for everyone.
All of this leaves us with a critical, ticking clock. Will the market adapt fast enough to supply affordable, repairable EVs before emissions bans force 16 million aging utility vehicles off the road? The physics absolutely prove it's possible, but the economic ecosystem is still desperately trying to catch up. It's a massive tension point, and how it resolves will quite literally define the entire future of the automotive landscape.
I really hope this breakdown gave you a totally new perspective on the real challenges and incredible opportunities within the electric transition. Thank you so much for joining me today on this explainer to uncover these key market insights. Keep learning, stay curious, and I will catch you on the next deep dive.